How many of you remember the show Hee Haw? Okay, all the old people raised their hands. That's good. You're being honest today. Do you remember that song? Yeah, that was a bit they would do almost every show where they'd come out and they'd sing the first verse there of that song. Gloom, despair, agony on me, deep, dark depression, excessive misery. If it weren't for bad luck, I'd have no luck at all. Gloom, despair, and agony on me. And then they would tell a sad story, but it was like a funny sad story, right? And they would sing that chorus again. And I didn't realize how much I was dating myself. I came in today and I said to Matt Welch, I said, hey, listen, I almost had you sing this song today. You remember that song from Hee Haw? And he kind of went, what are you talking about, man? I'm like, oh, man. And I went to Matt Linden. I said, hey, Matt, I almost had you sing this song. And Matt goes, I never heard a Hee Haw in my life. And I forgot he's a Jew, so he's not to watch Hee Haw, right? So I really started to feel old, and when you said an old man coming up and boring us, I'm like, man, I'm feeling it today. But gloom, despair, and agony on me, deep, dark depression, excessive misery. We kind of chuckle about a song like that, but you know what? There have been times in my life where that could have been my theme song. And I'm sure some of you have gone through times in your life where you were just like, despair, discouragement, agony, pain, grief, sorrow, anxiety. We've all gone through times in our life like this. We can identify with what these hillbillies are singing about. The fact of the matter is, 1 in 20 Americans say that in the last 12 months they have had a bout with depression. 1 in 10 Americans have said that they have had extended periods of time where they did not feel life was worth living. 17 million Americans last year alone were treated for depression, and that's just people who were treated for depression. Edward F. Ziegler calls depression the common cold of psychological disorders. It is that prevalent in our society and in our life. We all experience days when we get the blues, when we're discouraged, when we have that funk hanging over us. And it hurts. It's painful. And it's not the kind of pain like when a kid on Jacob's team yesterday broke his shoulder. It's not that kind of pain. It's not the kind of pain everyone can see, because depression is the pain that no one else can see but you. Depression is that type of pain that others can't understand. And it doesn't heal like a physical ailment. Once it heals, it just doesn't go away. It's one of those pains, it's one of those maladies that reoccurs. And it can be crushing to those who have to carry this weight. During one of his many reoccurring bouts with depression, our former president, Abraham Lincoln, once said, turn on the thing. Well, these are the slides you were supposed to see when I was giving you all those statistics about depression. But our former president said this. He said, you know what? If you took everything that I feel inside of me and you distributed it among all the people on earth, there wouldn't be one happy face anywhere. That's how low and how down he felt. Now, some of you are here today, might be struggling with depression. You are down, and though you try to lift yourself up, you can't seem to do so, and your friends are no help, right? What do they say? Just snap out of it, right? Just pick yourself up. Build a bridge and get over it, right? And only if you could. You would do it, but it's not that easy. This morning I want to take a look at a man in the Bible. We're going to look a little bit this week, and we're going to finish up next week. We're going to look at a man in the Bible who did absolutely amazing things in God's kingdom. He was courageous, and yet he struggled with depression. He struggled with anxiety and disappointment. We'd look at this guy and we'd say, man, this guy's a success. This guy has accomplished great things, and yet he was a man who felt gloom, despair, and agony. First, let me give you a little background about the time and the situation that this man finds himself in. By the 9th century B.C., the kingdom of Israel, which once had been united under King David and under Solomon, had now been fractured into 2 separate kingdoms. 2 separate kingdoms with 2 separate kings. It was divided, the northern kingdom of Israel and the southern kingdom of Judah. Now, if you notice on this map, Judah got one thing that Israel didn't get. Judah got Jerusalem. And that was big. We got Jerusalem. We've got the temple. We've got the city where Solomon and David ruled from. We got Jerusalem and you don't have it. So what do you think the kings up in the northern kingdom of Israel did? They did everything they could to divert their people's attention away from Jerusalem. They went about and they said, you know what, we're not going to have one temple in Jerusalem. We're going to build temples everywhere. We're going to build altars to God everywhere. We're going to have more priests than they have down there in Jerusalem. Matter of fact, we're going to start anointing priests who aren't even from the family of the Levites, which was the only place where God wanted his priests to come from, right? We're going to start putting all kinds of priests out there. Anyone can be a priest. Just dial up and say you believe in God, and boom, we'll send you a card in the mail, and you're a card-carrying priest now. And then they also started doing some other things. Not only were they building temples to Jehovah God, they started allowing and encouraging the construction of temples to foreign gods. This was something that they did because they thought it would bring them some stability in the region with their... Listen, they built temples in Israel to a god called Baal, B-A-A-L. He was the god of the Canaanites. The Canaanites had been the enemies of the Israelites for like forever. And here they are building temples in Israel to this god Baal. Most of this happened under a king named Omri. He was the king of Israel. He put some of these policies in place. He wanted to reorient the religious focus of the people of Israel away from Jerusalem. And as it turns out, away from God. Away from God being the one true God. And he allowed these temples to be built. You know, this Baal, he was a Canaanite god. He was a very, very important god. He was the god of thunder, lightning, rain, and dew. Sounds like a law firm. He was the god of thunder, lightning, rain, and dew. That's what he was responsible for. So he was a big deal to the Canaanites. So in order to make some peace in his region, this King Omri decides, I'm going to set up this arranged marriage. I'm going to take my son Ahab, and I'm going to marry him to this real sweet, loving, beautiful woman named Jezebel. How many Jezebels do we have in the audience? Yeah, we don't. How many grandkids or children? No, we don't name our kids Jezebel. She wasn't a very sweet, loving, nice person. She was a princess of a king of Sidon, but she was also a priestess of this false god Baal. All right? And, you know, between Ahab and Jezebel, they really wrecked things in Israel. In fact, in his capital city, Ahab built a temple to Baal, and Jezebel brought 450 priests of Baal and installed them in this temple. Now, even though this might have endeared them to the Canaanites, it might have made them prosperous for a while, and it did make them prosperous for a while, this line of kings had taken God's people and turned them away. And this is where we find a man coming onto the scene named Elijah in 1 Kings chapter 17. We don't have any background on this person named Elijah. We know he's a Tishbite. We know that his name in Hebrew means, my God is Yahweh. That's what Elijah means. My God is Yahweh. And for those of you who don't know, Yahweh is the Hebrew way to say Jehovah. Right? That's kind of an odd name to have. Hi, my name's Joe. Hi, my God is Yahweh. Yeah, but what's your name? My God is Yahweh. Yeah, but who's on first? I mean, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, right? This was something that was probably bestowed upon him at some point when he became a prophet of God. But Elijah, acting on the orders of Yahweh, goes to Ahab and says, listen, because of what you've let happen here, there's going to be years of severe drought. There will be no rain. In fact, it's going to be so severe, there's not even going to be dew on the ground. Let's stop here and note what's actually being said here. What is Baal the god of? Thunder, lightning, rain, and dew. Elijah, and Jehovah through Elijah, is saying, let's just see if Baal is the god of thunder, lightning, rain, and dew. Elijah says, my God is going to shut the spigot off. And let's see what Baal does now. He's kind of calling Baal out in a little bit of a street fight here. And this proclamation, this warning that Elijah gives to Ahab kind of sets in motion a series of 5 events in Elijah's life. And as we step back and we're going to look at these 5 events very quickly this morning, I want you to ask yourself, if I was Elijah and this was happening to me, how would I feel about me? how would I feel about me and my relationship with God? Okay? I want you to think about this. Well, the first event, obviously, is Ahab, or the proclamation that he gave to Ahab. Hey, guess what, Ahab? Because I say so, it ain't going to rain unless I command it. Now, obviously, God would be the one who would tell him to command it, but Elijah says, it ain't raining until I give it the okay. And it didn't rain. Now, if I came to you today, it's getting cloudy out there today, and it's going to rain. If I came to you and said, you know what? It's going to get cloudy, and I'm going to see to it doesn't rain today at all, and God's not going to let it rain. And it didn't rain, I'd feel pretty cool. I'd feel like I was in control of some stuff. Right? That was the first event. The second event was this. After the warning, God kind of takes Elijah aside and says, listen, it's not going to rain for a while, and because you brought the message, you ain't going to be real popular around here. No one's going to invite you to lunch after church today. Matter of fact, they're probably going to want to kill you. So I think what you ought to do, Elijah, I want you to go east of the Jordan River, and there I've prepared a place for you. There's a little stream of running water that through this drought, that's where I want you. You can drink from this stream. And oh, by the way, don't worry about food. I'm going to have ravens bring you food, bread and meat. God was way ahead of this whole delivery by drone thing. He was way ahead of his time. He had a whole army of drone ravens, right, bringing Elijah meat and bread every day. He took care of him. Now listen, if you were Elijah and you had just shut off the spigots of all the rain, and God has got you this neat little place where you have water, and God brings you food. God is serving you food every day. Would you feel pretty good about yourself? I think that's pretty cool. I think I'd be pretty cool with that myself. The third thing that happened to Elijah, the third event, at some point during this drought, God allows the stream to dry up. And he says to Elijah, listen, I want you to go to this little town in Sidon, and I've picked out a widow. And you're going to go live with her during this drought, and she's going to take care of you. So Elijah gets up, he goes to this little town, and he's coming into the town, and he sees this widow picking up wood to make a fire. And he says to her, hey, listen, can you get me some water to drink? She goes, yep, I'll get you a glass of water. And he goes, oh, by the way, can you get me some bread, too? She goes, hey, whoa. I got no bread. I've got a little handful of flour, and I've got just a little bit of oil in a jar to make bread with, and I'm out here getting this firewood because I'm going to go home and make a fire, make some bread. My son and I, we're going to eat this, and then we're going to sit down and die. Wouldn't you like to stay in this woman's house? She's a cheery sort of person, right? We're going to have this last meal, and we're going to die. That's what we're going to do. So you know what? I don't have anything for you. And Elijah says, you know what? God, upon my word, God promises that as long as this drought lasts, the flour will never run out and the oil will never run dry. And it didn't. Until the Lord commands it to rain, He's going to take care of us. We'll never run out of flour. We'll never run out of oil. And that's exactly what happened. If you had a little Tupperware dish at home of flour, and as much as you scooped out, it kept filling back up again because God was filling it up, would you feel pretty good about your relationship with God? That would be pretty cool. I'd like it more if it was like a bag of Chips Ahoy's cookies that never ran out, but I'll take the flour. That would be cool too. The fourth thing that happened, the fourth event in Elijah's life that happened after this proclamation is he's living with this widow. Everything's going along fine, and all of a sudden the son gets sick. And he gets sicker and sicker and sicker and sicker until one day the Bible says he just stops breathing. And the widow, being the glass half full kind of woman that she was, turns to Elijah and said, what have you done to me? She's blaming Elijah for this. She's a real happy person, this one. And he says, hey, it wasn't me. But give me your son. And he takes him upstairs, he lays him on the bed, and he goes to God in prayer, and he's a little bit doubting. He said, God, what? This widow's been taking care of me, and you do this to her? Why did you cause this to happen? Please, God, show this woman. Bring this woman's son back to her. Show her that I am a man of God. And he prays over the boy. And the Lord answers his prayers. He comes back to life. Elijah raises the dead. Now, I ask you, if you were Elijah and you were walking around raising dead kids, would you feel pretty good about yourself? Would you feel successful? Would you feel like God had your best interest in mind? I think you probably would feel pretty good about this. Then the fifth thing. And this is kind of the big one. This is one of the things that Elijah is known for. It was in the 3rd year without any rain, because Elijah said there wouldn't be any rain, that the Lord comes to Elijah and says, hey, listen, I want you to go talk to King Ahab. I want you to tell him that rain is coming soon. I'm going to end this drought. So Elijah goes back to Ahab and he said, listen, all this trouble that you've been going through, don't blame God. It's because of you and your forefathers and all the kings that followed you. It's your problem. It's your fault, but God is going to bring the rain back. Now, it's interesting. Most times in the Bible when God relents, when God allows good to come to the people again, it's because they have repented already, right? Repent, turn back to me, and things will be good again. This time, God says, hey, I'm going to bring the rain. It's coming back. Just go tell them. The people had not repented of anything, right? They hadn't turned from Baal yet. So Elijah says to Ahab, he goes, here's what I want you to do. I want you to get all of Israel together. I want you to bring them over to Mount Carmel. And oh, by the way, bring those 450 priests of Baal with you too, because this is going to be some fun. We're going to have a little wiener roast here. Come over to Mount Carmel tomorrow morning, and let's talk about the rain coming back. So they get over to Mount Carmel that morning, and Elijah starts to scold the people. And it's interesting what the Bible says. It says, Elijah stands before him and says, he says, how long are you not going to choose between your two gods? How long are you not going to choose between Baal and Jehovah? How long are you going to sit on the fence? You got to choose one or the other. And the Bible says the people said nothing. They didn't say, oh yeah, we're going to take Baal, or we're going to. They said nothing. You know why? Why should we? Everything's cool the way it is. Why do we have to pick between two gods? There was nothing that was pressing them or guiding them to make a decision. And Elijah was about to give them something to make a decision. What he says, go get 2 bulls and bring them here. Give 1 bull to the prophets of Baal, these 400 prophets, and give 1 to me. We'll each cut up the bull into pieces of meat. We'll lay it on some wood, but we won't light the wood. We'll just leave the meat sit on the wood, and then we'll pray to our gods. And we'll see which God answers by setting the wood on fire. And the people of Israel said, hey, you know what? This could be kind of interesting. That's a good idea. Let's try that. So Elijah said, tell you what, because I'm the sporting kind of guy, you guys can go first. So the 450 prophets of Baal cut up the bull, they put it on their wood, and they start praying. And this is early in the morning, and they pray till noontime. They're calling out, they're crying out to Baal, please answer our prayers. And, you know, we find out something about Elijah's character here. He's kind of a smart aleck. At noontime, he starts saying, you know, I've been thinking, maybe your God went on a trip. Maybe he took a vacation. Or maybe he's a deep thinker and he's deep in thought, so maybe you need to yell a little louder. Or maybe your God, he's asleep. You need to wake him up. And so the prophets of Baal, they begin to yell louder and louder, and they begin to take out their swords and cut their arms and their bodies, and they begin to bleed, begging Baal to answer them. And this goes on until the time of the evening sacrifice. And guess what? Baal never picks up the phone. Now it's Elijah's turn. Elijah takes 12 stones, and he builds a little altar on the ground. And he lays the meat on those stones. And then he does a curious thing. He digs a trench around the altar. And then he says to the people standing around, he goes, hey, go get 4 large pots of water and dump it on the meat and on the wood and all over the ground around here. And they do it. And then he says, do it again. They take 4 large pots of water, dump it on the meat, dump it on the wood, and all the ground around. And then he says, do it again. 12 large pots of water, dousing this. And the Bible says that there was so much water that water filled the ditch around the altar. A soaking wet mess of bull meat. That's a pretty picture. And then Elijah goes to God in prayer. And he says to the Lord, he said, listen, it's not about me. Prove to your people that you are who you say you are. If you do this now, you will change the people's minds. They will know that you are the God of Israel, and they will turn back to you. And with that, fire came down from the heavens and burned up the sacrifice of meat, and it burned up the wood, and it burned up the stones, and it burned the ground around the stones, and it evaporated all the water that was in the ditch. And with that, the people fell down on the ground and they began crying, you know what? The Lord, He is God. They turned away. They turned back to God. That wasn't enough for Elijah, though. Elijah said, he turned to the people and said, capture those 450 prophets. And he led them down to the Kishon Valley where he executed them all. Short time after that, Elijah went to King Ahab, who had been there witnessing all this. He said, listen, you better get in your chariot, and you better head back to Jezreel, because it's going to rain. It's going to rain hard, and your chariot's going to get bogged down, so you better get going. So he leaves, and the rain starts. The rain starts to pour down, and verse 46 of chapter 19 says that the Lord gave Elijah his strength, and it says that Elijah ran ahead of the king. He started running toward Jezreel, and he passes the king in his chariot. He runs from Carmel to Jezreel, 18 miles. I ask you, if you could run 18 miles, would you be feeling pretty good about yourself? Yeah. He runs 18 miles back to Jezreel. Can you imagine how he must have felt right then? He won. Through the power of God, Elijah has won. He's kicked some pagan butt. He's gotten rid of all these prophets. The people have repented and turned back to God. He is on top of the mountain, but it is at this exact point in the story of Elijah where he faces a battle with depression. At this exact moment in time. Now, in a minute, we're going to see that Elijah had some reasons why he might be depressed. But I think if we were to look at his life, we'd say, man, what? Really? You're depressed? What have you got to be depressed about? Your life looks pretty good to me. You've got this great relationship with God. You're doing all these miraculous things. What do you have to be depressed about? Hey, listen, you know that God has done all these miraculous things for you. That slide looks okay, doesn't it? You see what that is? Kind of funky, isn't it? Yeah, sorry about that. This is him getting the drone. Here's your ravens, right? And here's the oil and flour, which doesn't look like that. There's the widow and her son, and there's the battle with the prophets there. When you look at the scope of his life, you're like, man, you're successful. You are in good with God, and you're going to get depressed now? I mean, there's people that we see all around us that we say, man, your life looks pretty good. I don't know what you're so down about. You got it good. I wish I had your life. Let's switch lives. I'll take yours. Elijah shouldn't have been discouraged. God had provided for him many times before. Just like Matt was saying in his comments today. God has always provided. He'll continue to provide. What are you depressed for? You know, as Christians, we've got a lot going for us, right? We have a lot that we shouldn't be depressed about. God has proven over and over to us He is who He is. He sent His Son to live a perfect life. He sent Him to the cross. He sealed eternal life for us with an empty tomb. Why in the world would we ever be depressed or down or sad? I can tell you all kinds of reasons why we should never be discouraged. And I wish I could say that Christians never get depressed, but it's simply not true. Too many Christians have this notion that once you become a Christian, there's never another moment of sorrow or anxiety or depression that are going to come into your life. It's simply not true. I'm not a Facebook user. I have a Facebook account, and many of you have sent me friend requests. It's not that I don't like you or want to be your friend. I just don't use Facebook, right? But every so often, Carol, she monitors the worldwide news on Facebook for me and tells me everything that I really need to know. And one time she showed me, and I call this internet bumper stickers. You know, people will post these like little one-liners out there. They're supposed to be like these pearls of wisdom in 10 words or less. And they drive me nuts. It's like these 10 words replace, meaningful dialogue and real study, right? And she showed me this post one time. It said, and I forget the exact words, but it said something like this. If you're a Christian and you're not always joyful, then there's something wrong with your faith. That's what someone who's clinically depressed needs to hear, right? Not only are you miserable, but your faith stinks, man. That's exactly what people need to hear, to be dug out of that. Listen, it's not that simple. It's not a one-liner. It's not a one-liner to say, oh, that cleared it all up for me. It's a faith problem why I'm unhappy. Christians have this notion, right? I've got the joy, 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 joy down in my heart. Where? Down in my heart. We're happy, bubbly, nothing ever goes wrong, and everything's happy, right? That's bull crap. It's not reality. We're not immune from having those times where the clouds hang over our heads. Great Christian men and women have struggled with bouts of deep, dark depression. The great church reformer Martin Luther was known for his bouts with depression. He would go and lock himself into the study for days on end. His wife got sick of it. One time, he had locked himself in his study for 3 days, and while he was in there, she put on a black dress and put a black veil over her face. And when he came out, he said, oh my God, who has died? And she goes, God died. And Martin Luther goes, how can you say that? That's heresy. Don't ever say that again. And she said, I won't say it again, but you got to stop acting like God did die. Look through the Bible. We find so many of God's people who struggled with depression and discouragement. Moses, David, God, take me away. Job cursed the day that he was born. Many of you, if you read any Christian books or commentaries, you often see a man quoted named Spurgeon. Charles Spurgeon, you ever see that name? He was a prolific preacher back in the 18th century. He would get so depressed at times that they would have to carry him into the pulpit to deliver his message. He used to walk out into his garden, fall to his knees, raise his hands to heaven, and just cry, why, God? Just because we call ourselves Christians does not mean we're immune to the forces and influences in this world that can bring us down. Where Elijah gets depressed. And there are many circumstances that made him, listen, vulnerable to being depressed. And as we look at these, I want you to listen to them, and I want you to, it's very interesting. The Bible kind of points out some of these things that happened to him so that we can see what could trigger depression. And it's amazing how well they line up with what modern psychology tells us triggers depression today. This is like a case study for depression, what we're going to look at here. The first thing that made Elijah susceptible to being depressed is that he had just won a great victory. He just defeated these 400 prophets of the false god Baal. God had won the victory. The people turned back to him. Elijah won hands down. I did it. It's over. We won. And yet that made him susceptible to depression. Now that sounds a little bit backwards. It sounds a little counterintuitive. The psychology tells us that in our human minds, when we're on the top of the mountain, in our minds, what do we say? There's only one direction I can go from here. And what's that? Back down the mountain, right? I was doing a lot of reading this week about this phenomenon. And one of the things they brought up was Christmas depression. A lot of people get depressed on the holidays. And it takes on different forms and fashions. But one of the ways happens is, what happens before Christmas? You're shopping, you're baking cookies, you're decorating the tree, you're watching Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer on TV, you're doing all this great stuff, right? And Christmas Day comes, and it's, woo, open the presents, you have the meal, and you see your family, and then they leave, and then what? Nothing. And this causes people to become depressed. They were up here, and now nothing. Case study after case study shows these people that are very successful in business, that build these large, dynasties, these large corporations, suffer the most with depression. They are on top of the financial world, and they suffer with depression. Athletes, at the end of their careers, all their career in the spotlight, great career. When they retire, what happens? They were up here, now they're down here. You look at their lives and say, man, I wish I was Big Poppy, man. Number 17 all-time on the home run list, getting all these cool gifts from all these cities. But you know what? He might be susceptible to depression next year when he comes back, and guess what? The lights aren't on him anymore. He was at the top. Now he's no longer at the top. That's Elijah. Elijah just won this great victory. He's at the top, and when there are tops, there are always bottoms. And guess what? He's about to get a real big taste of rolling down the mountain. And this is the second thing that makes him susceptible to depression. He gets some very bad news. After his 18-mile run from Mount Carmel back to Jezreel, where I know he must be thinking, Ahab's going to stand up and say, the whole kingdom's going to worship God now. We're going to tear down the temple, and all these great things are going to happen. He gets the news that someone has put a contract out on his life. That sweet, loving, beautiful princess, now queen, Jezebel, says, you know what? By this time tomorrow, you're a dead man. You see, everyone else turned away from Baal. Everyone else repented, or they were executed, except for the queen. And the queen says, can you imagine this? He just won the greatest victory of his life. He thinks God's with me. We're doing it. And now Jezebel has put a contract out on his life. I think it's funny that Elijah wasn't afraid of the 450 men, but it only took one woman to scare him away. There's a sermon there for another time. But psychologists tell us that depression is almost always preceded by some type of bad news. It's always preceded by the realization of a truth that is out of our control. Let me say that again. That's important. Something that can trigger depression is the realization of a truth. You realize something that's absolutely true that is completely out of your control. I was talking to Stan this morning a little bit, and he was telling me when he was a kid he was afraid of the Cold War. He was afraid of the Russians nuking us. Could the Russians nuke us? Yeah, that's a fact. And he could do nothing about it. That realization gave him anxiety, right? The realization of a truth that is out of your control. 85-year-old man sitting on the curb, crying his eyes out, uncontrollably. A man walks up to him. What's the matter? Why are you crying so much? He goes, I'm 85 years old and I'm married to a 22-year-old gorgeous woman who's madly in love with me. Then why are you crying? I just realized I don't remember where I live. It's this realization of something that's out of his control. It pushed him into depression. When something bad happens in your life, of course we're going to get upset about it. Psychologists say you get to the big D, depression, by one of the 4 Ds: death, disease, disaster, or divorce. These are things that naturally affect us. And it is natural to feel anxiety, discouragement, sadness, sorrow. I mean, if someone close to you died and you didn't feel that way, then there's something really wrong with you. But there is a limit. If you know someone who suffered one of these great losses and 6 months later they're not finding joy in life, or they're still in the house, they won't come out, there's something awry in the grieving process. The third thing that made Elijah susceptible to being depressed was he was physically exhausted. He was wore out. He had just had this day-long event, battling 450 prophets of Baal. He just ran 18 miles to Jezreel only to find out that there's a contract on his life. And you know what he does after that? He turns around and starts running the other way. For an entire day, he runs into the desert, away from the danger. He is at near exhaustion right now. And you know as well as I do, when you are exhausted, when you've been burning the candle at both ends, you are more susceptible to feelings of defeat and despair and gloom. Ask parents of a newborn child that doesn't sleep through the night, right? When you're sleep deprived, I got the joy, 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 joy. Shut up, right? Do you want to hear that from somebody? No. You are more likely to succumb to thoughts of depression. And I say this because I know some of you, and I know how some of your lives are very active. You got a lot of things going on, and that's fine. But you're setting yourself up for a crash. Learn to take some time off. Learn to relax. Learn to slow down. Or you will suffer burnout, and you'll set yourself up with a battle of depression. So here we have Elijah. He was up here, now he's down here. He's just got some bad news. He's completely and utterly exhausted. His life is in danger. His situation in his life has gotten worse rather than better because of the great thing that he has done. And now he's going to come face to face with his battle with depression. Next week we're going to examine this battle with discouragement and depression. and how it impacted his life, how it altered his outlook, and how it impacted his relationship with God. And we're going to look at how God responds to his depression. God didn't say, why don't you just snap out of it, build a bridge and get over it. That's not how God responds to Elijah's depression. But until then, I want you to leave today knowing this. If you are a follower of God, and you find yourself being discouraged for periods of time, if you have times where you do fight with depression, I want you to know something. You are not a defective Christian. I want you to know that you're not a defective Christian. You're merely human. Charles Spurgeon, who I mentioned earlier, once said that the best of men are but men at best. We are susceptible to the influences and the powers and the things that go on and the forces in this world, but it is how we overcome that will set us apart. We're going to look at that next week, and I think you're going to find it very interesting, as I said before, some of the things that God does to treat, if you will, treat Elijah's depression. Well, guess what? Modern psychology only took them a couple thousand years to catch up. It's the same kind of stuff that they're prescribing now. And listen, and let me be very clear, and Matt mentioned this as well. There are some forms of depression that are caused by chemical imbalances. There are some things that are caused by depression that are caused by severe mental disorder. I get that. What I'm talking about is this, when you find yourself in a period of your life where you would say, I'm depressed, I'm discouraged, I'm down, I'm beaten down. That's what I'm talking about here. If you're going through one of those dark periods right now, or if you know someone and you're trying to help them through this dark period, come back next week. Let's look at what depression did to Elijah and what God did to pull him out of that. But if you're here today and you feel like you're at the end of your rope, if you just feel like you are gloom, despair, and agony, go right back to this room as we sing this next song. There'll be people waiting there to talk with you, pray with you, and give you whatever assistance we can to help you. Gloom, despair, and agony, yeah, sometimes we go through periods of our life with it, but it shouldn't be the way we live our lives. Because we know that the God of yesterday, the God of today, will be the God of tomorrow. He holds our future in his hands. So let's stand together and sing.